It felt like my soul had been someplace else for a really, really long time.
I entered into the eye of the storm of grief that I had been carrying. I began to cry.
The littlest thing would just send me into an anxiety spiral that, like, it's just one little thing. Why is this little thing ruining my day?
Eleusinia is a unique psilocybin retreat based in Mexico with a focus on meditation, neuroscience, and brain health.
I had zero doubt that this was something that I was going to go through and actually do.
That self-compassion sort of has trickled into every little part of my life.
I hadn't laughed that hard in so long.
The profoundness with which I experienced like reality, the magnitude of the beauty was just completely overwhelmed.
Irene, it is such an honor to have you on the show. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and why you decided to come to Eleusinia?
Well, thank you, Tanya. It's an honor to be here and share my experience. My name is Irene. I live on the East Coast in the US, and I work in animal welfare. And I decided to come to Eleusinia. It's been about a year since I initially attended the retreat. And I approached it because I struggle with chronic pain. I have a form of skeletal dysplasia. That means that all of my joints are not formed properly. And it means that I've had a lot of surgeries throughout my life just to get me to a place where I could functionally walk or move. But it's never been comfortable, and it will never really be comfortable. And I had both of my hips replaced a few years actually before coming to Eleusinia, and I was not able to move. I was not feeling okay in my body. I was feeling like something was profoundly wrong. I was feeling, in fact, so much that my body was not mine, like I was not in control anymore. And I came to the retreat as a last-ditch effort, really, to try and figure out. I knew that something was profoundly wrong, something off, something was not working. And I knew that there was no physical reason for that, right? Like, mechanically speaking, I was in better shape than I had been in a very long time. And it still just was not working for me. So that was how I initially approached my Eleusinia experience, was trying to manage this chronic pain.
And had you had experience with psychedelics before you came, or?
I actually, about a month before I came to Eleusinia, I booked a whole bunch of things out of desperation. So I was looking at kind of somatic therapy and mind-body integration options, and I landed at ayahuasca. And so I went to Mexico about a month before I attended the retreat, and I had my first and second ayahuasca experiences, and also experiences with other plant-based medicines like kambo and bufo. So I really concentrated all of this all at once, and I'm not sure exactly what called me to that, but it was an act of desperation. It really was.
So did you have a profound experience in your ayahuasca experience before you came, or was it not what you expected?
It was definitely not what I expected. So I tried really to enter into those experiences with no expectations. In fact, with the ayahuasca, I deliberately did not read about experiences. I knew the mechanics of the process, but I did not really want to know or hear about other people's experiences because I wanted to fully have my own. And it was scary for me just entering into that space. And it ultimately was a profoundly destabilizing experience because I came out of that first session and I think I cried for about 24 hours straight. It shook something loose in me that I could not identify. That was a grief it was an overwhelming sadness, but not just for myself, for the world, for the other people around me who were having similar experiences, and many of them who were really struggling with those. And it was profound, but it shook forth this grief that I didn't think that I had, but also this frustration, because for me, my body has been such a source of frustration It doesn't do what I want it to do. It's in pain. It feels very limited. I've always felt like it held me back. But also, I carry all of this tension in my body. I'm working so hard all the time to hold myself together, to hold my joints in place. My muscles are just tired all the time. And I do tend to overwork. I just go and I go and I go and I go until I literally can't walk or can't move anymore because I'm so determined. And so in that initial ayahuasca experience, I could feel my body wanting to let go. And there are spots in my body that I hold tension chronically, like my low back. The right side of my low back has always been extremely tight. And that has a physiological reason. Initially, it was because my hips were so bad that, when your hips are not good, your back, your other parts of your body kick in to compensate for that. So, but it was this chronic tightness and there was no reason for that actually to be there anymore. And I kept saying to myself in this experience, you need to let go. Let go. Why can't you let go? I remember lying on my back and kind of stomping my feet, trying to shake that tension out. And I realized that I couldn't do it. I had gotten to the point where that was what needed to happen and I couldn't do it. So the initial ayahuasca experience was, again, profound, but also very destabilizing and very sad. It began a process of grieving that I did not expect.
No, did you have second thoughts about attending Eleusinia after that experience?
Not at all. I think I did do in that initial week in Mexico prior to Eleusinia, I also had a second ayahuasca experience. I had some of that grief transmute itself into a form of release, a form of play, letting go some of that tension, realizing that I could. And so that, I think, more than anything, allowed me to see the change that was possible. Yes, it was work, and it was scary work, and it was unexpected, and it was exhausting. But I know, if anything, I was actually more convinced that this was going to, I don't want to say the solution, but I kind of want to say the solution, that this was the lifeline for me. This was the way forward.
Amazing. So do you recall much of your first macrodose experience while you were at Eleusinia?
I do. And so it's so interesting. Initially, I was very lucid, or what I would say is very lucid. I was very much there, in my head and in my body, but I was physiologically feeling very woozy, having difficulty standing up, which was so interesting because at the same time, I was being pushed by myself. I was feeling compelled to move, to almost contort myself into physical positions that were my body wanted. My body was telling me, move this way, let this go, release this, move the arm over here, and they were movements that there was an urgency to them. It wasn't just like, oh, I feel like I want to move. It was, I have to do this. It was, for me, a lot of that experience was a profound building of energy and potentially frustration, but that building of urgency, right? It was of vital importance for me to do that. And I just followed along. And that took a long time, actually, though, for me. I was very much in my own head for, it feels like a substantial amount of time before I kind of descended into my body and allowed that experience to happen. And then shortly after that, I fell into a place or started to embody a place that I called the void. And it was the place of infinite power and potential and of everything and nothing. And I was there as an entity, as a spirit, but I did not have a body. There, it was darkness, but it wasn't the darkness that was black, as in there was nothing. It really was like, if you picture dust in sunlight, it was something like that, except it was black, dark. And it was what I had been looking for for such a long time a place of quiet, freedom from language, freedom from physical reality. And it felt like I was touching really this source of infinite power, like I could tap into the power that was inside me, and I say the void and these words, and I only realized much later that there is psychedelic terminology for these things and that they're represented in so many spiritual traditions. And so it's so interesting for me now to kind of reflect on that, because in that moment, that's just where I was. And I had been looking for it. It was this feeling of coming home to myself when I realized that that source of infinite power was inside me, but it was also everywhere. It was a really profound experience and an unusual one, I think, in a lot of ways. And then I was kind of up again and out. But those were the two big moments, I think, for me, was that physical embodying myself and then all of a sudden finding this freedom from that.
Wow. I remember you by the fire doing yoga positions and all sorts of movements. And then, I remember much later getting to hear about that transformative experience with the void. Do you recall your mini dose experience as well?
I do. And that was also a progression and an evolution. It was very different from the macro because I did not go to the void. I was still, I think, too much in my head. I was still too much there. But it was also a longer onset. And by that point, because I felt such release in those physical movements, and I was feeling hope, right? That my body could work its way free from this tension. I was feeling inspired. And so I had decided initially at the mini dose that I was going to work with Andrew, who was the movement person at Eleusinia at that time. And we were going to work on trying to physically massage some of the areas, and specifically my left leg, that were stuck, that I felt I'd identified actually as problematic. And so I was doing some self-massage with that initially. And then I got a kind of like this call or this urgency that I needed the water. And I also should say in my macro dose, I spent a lot of the time in the pool as well, just kind of moving around and floating. And I've always felt connected to water. It's always the place that I felt the most free because I think of the stress on my joints. It's very comforting. But also I got very cold. And so I spent most of the time in the sun and also in the water. So after this experience of movement and liberating that, I got into the water and I started to enjoy being in my body. I started to feel what it felt like to move and to be comfortable in that movement and to play. I remember looking at the tiles in the hot tub at Eleusinia and seeing that they had these subtle veins. They were blue, right, with these subtle white veining, and thinking, that's like the mycelium. That's like the mycelium in the mushrooms. That's the underground network connecting everyone and everything and communicating silently. And, having a number of thoughts and realizations about those connections and feeling that energy. So I remember moving around in the hot tub for quite some time, just kind of bouncing off the walls and enjoying my body. But also at a certain point, I realized how much I had lost my joy, the source, despite everything that I had experienced, surgeries as a kid and chronic pain and a lot of challenging things that are ongoing. I had always felt this degree of happiness or inspiration or interest or engagement in the world. And I had lost that. That had been gone. That had been absent for quite some time. And I felt that resurge in that moment of, again, it took that level of physical comfort, I think, for me to say, I'm here and I'm enjoying this. And I also started to have some realizations about how my insistence on being strong and independent and stoic and pushing down all of these feelings of pain, right? Acknowledging my feelings has been such a challenge for me that I've pushed people out of my life who could have been there for me or would have helped me because I would not acknowledge what it was I was feeling, let alone what it was that I needed. And so I never asked for anything. I was never comfortable with that. And it took, it was that moment actually staring at the tiles that I really recall having that realization of this is a network and I have people who are there for me. I do. And I haven't been comfortable asking them for what it was that I needed because I could not acknowledge how I was feeling. And then it sort of, that experience sort of evolved and dissolved into laughter. And I remember when I was lucid enough that they were comfortable with it, I kind of dove into the pool and flipped around like a seal. And I remember saying, like, I am a seal and I am playing. Like, seals who bounce the balls on their noses. And there's no reason for them to do that, right? There's like, no one is giving them treats or something. Like, seals play in the wild. And I felt in that moment like a seal, just happily like flopping around in the water, for the joy of it, just simply for the joy of it, and nothing more.
So you left in good spirits, knowing that this is going to be a tool that you can work with, and you continue to weave it in your life right away, or what was your launching pad like as you arrived home and started to integrate from your ayahuasca and also the psilocybin?
That was a hard transition. I think, for a lot of people, leaving is, you don't want to go. It is such a safe place and a safe space. And it's scary to think about how you're going to take this with you into your life. And so I did decide that immediately that this was going to be a part of my existence moving forward. And I did end up, so initially it's a bit of like and I think you said this to me, you have to figure out like what your trigger is. And for me, approaching this from a chronic pain standpoint was actually different from what my experience ended up being. So I came to this saying, I need to feel more comfortable. I need to be out of pain. And I did know that it has such a profound effect on inflammation. So I thought, okay, those are all really, really great things. But that's really what I had sort of limited myself to in terms of consciousness when going to the retreat and then immediately following, like coming back, saying, okay, how often am I going to need to do this in order to make sure that my swelling is under control, the inflammation in my joints, that I feel comfortable? And also, I was approaching it and using it as a therapeutic tool for expanding my movement. One of the things about significant orthopedic surgeries is not only the recovery is really long, but when your joints are bad for such a long time, all of your muscles atrophy because they can't be used appropriately. So before you even have the surgery, if you've allowed that to go and that to decay, you're really coming up against muscles that hadn't been used in 25, 30 years for me, And so I was really determined to help them kick back in, to become functional, to really test kind of the boundaries of, I felt like a little drunk on power, honestly. It was like, I can change this. My neuroplasticity is limitless, like I can do it. So the way that I was crafting that experience was very based upon creating a container in which I could move, and I was deciding to work on certain things and just leaving myself open to the experience, but also doing mini doses specifically so that I could free up that movement. So for me, that meant having yoga props available and, things that if I felt compelled to move in a certain way, I was able to do that. And I was doing mini doses about every 2 weeks initially. And what really So again, initially it was so effective for me. Like I would start often lying on the ground flat and kind of allowing myself to relax into that experience. And I could feel electricity or power like coursing through my body. And I could feel it coalescing around certain parts of my muscles or my joints that were stuck. And they were saying, help me. This is the issue, right? Like your right knee is hurting because the muscles above and below it are not doing their job, right? They're not kicking in. Let's figure that out. Or the hip cannot rotate fully open on the left side because there's a blockage in the knee and we need to work on that. And so a lot of that for me was what I call the undoing. I spent a lot of that initial time undoing those patterns that I had used as coping mechanisms so that I could walk in the past. But now physically were no longer necessary because my structure had changed. And in fact, were holding me back because of that. So really radically going after that and allowing myself to feel that energy, but also I was directing it. I was very much harnessing it and sending it like pulses towards those places saying, you can let go now. You can let go. You've done the job, but now it's time. And instead, and that was a huge shift for me philosophically, just out the gate. This idea that instead of being angry at my body, instead of being sad, instead of thinking of it as something that was holding me back, saying thank you for being there. Thank you for tolerating all of this shit that I've thrown at you. All of this that we have to deal with, all of this difficulty, all of this trauma. Thank you for surviving that. And then, yeah, that was really radical. That was really radical for me. That shift from you're holding me back to you've been supporting me this whole time. You've been supporting me this whole time through really challenging, and you've been working so hard. Now it's time to let go and let other parts of the body do the work.
Wow. How many months would you say that period of undoing lasted?
Quite a few. I'm looking now. So I actually documented the vast majority of my sessions in a notebook, and I would write both about my feelings as part of that, but also about what actually happened. And it was definitely months, but then the undoing, I guess, to answer your question a little bit more fully, it became more than physical quite quickly.
Oh, so that's what I was wondering. Like, how did it transition into beyond the physical undoing? Like, at what time?
There was always a bit of it there. So I remember I just looked at my notebook, and one of the things that I had felt in one of those initial body scans, this is maybe my third or fourth at home experience, was I was in that mode of scanning and I said to myself, so it's interesting, like there are different ways that you can frame this, right? You can say, I said to myself, or you could say the thought occurred to me, or you could say, I felt that, right? Whenever you're describing any of these things. And so the realization occurred to me that my crown chakra was weak as part of this body scan, which is not language that I would have used at the time, right? Like talking about the chakras is not where I was, like as a human being, but my crown chakra is weak and my third eye is pulling to the left. And those were just two things that happened as part of that body scan. And I went, let's see if maybe we could even that out. And I started working on my third eye in my mind, and trying to see, could I get it to pull a little bit more towards the center? And then, that kicked off a whole process because for me, you talk about left brain, right? And left brain is that very analytical, rational side of the brain. And the right brain's more, the creative, emotional, intuitive side. And That's the very, basic, right? Like high school science approach to it. And I was like, what does that mean if my left, if my third eye is pulling towards the left? And I said, yes, that's true. I have been pulling towards the logical, towards the rational. I have weighted that more in everything in my life than I have the creative and intuitive side. I've exercised that muscle so much more than I have on the right. And so it was just sort of like noted, message received, right? Noted, and then moving forward. And then also as part of this, it quickly became, it wasn't, the physical discomfort was really only the gateway. It was what I was feeling that was on the surface. But the second realization was that the discomfort that I was feeling was emotional. It was an unease of being. It was this something being off inside of me. And I think also, talking about that chakra, and when I started questioning this and questioning, why do I hurt? And for me, the idea of pain is much more than physical. I have always felt a deep connection to other people and other things, animals, objects, my entire life. And I shut that down. I shut that down about the same time that I decided I was not able to feel because I was in too much pain, and that it was easier to separate my body from my brain and to say, I can just exist out here in my mind, floating sort of out to the side. I don't have to be in a body, right? It's dualism, essentially, right? It is Descartes, I think, therefore I am, prioritizing the mind over the body and pretending. I pretended that I did not have to be in this form because this form is terrible. This physical experience for me had been so awful and was always going to be awful. Nothing was going to change in that way. And that all came crashing down when, but it took this idea of unraveling that to the point of, no, you can actually experience comfort. And that is essential to experiencing joy. You can't separate yourself. You can't, just decide not to feel and expect to be happy. There was a period of mourning as well, I think, that I allowed myself to engage in that I had never allowed myself to do. I had never allowed myself to mourn for my body, for the body that could have been, had it been whole or different. And I think I needed to go through that period of grieving as well. And apologizing. I did apologize to my body a number of times throughout that experience.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like? I really want to give voice to people moving through similar experiences that don't understand what it looks like to move through and to really let go of grief like that. What did that look like for you?
I would like to read you something about the body scans. This is actually a portion. My body has enabled me to become transcendent. This was a very slow onset. I did some movement and relaxation. The concentric circles of the chandelier are beautiful. I used the lacrosse balls. I went outside and laid in the sun. I realized that if I could learn to thrive within my body, I could do anything. Transcendence. I have immense power. I haven't accessed most of it yet. I go inside and eat some fruit. See my husband go into the front room. I get comfortable. Then it starts to hit. I tell my body to show me what is stuck, what needs work. My left leg inside my thigh by the hip speaks first. It is unhappy and needs release. It wants to take the pressure off my right back. I send my energy, my well of power to it. I'm moving subtly, very small movements to release it and make it stronger. I scan my body with my energy. My third eye is weak. The left side is more prominent, dominant, but it's also weaker, like it's overworked or swollen. I move my eyes to open it, to strengthen and balance it, to see more evenly out of the top of my head. The pulling to the left lessens. I scan my body with my power. The right leg and outer hip want to work too. They also move and try to help the back. My body parts recognize how they are stressing each other out, not pulling their weight, and they want to awaken. I push both my hips into their sockets and move left to right. This is usually so uncomfortable as to be impossible for any duration. But here I finally have a release that radically opens my back. My power, my tendrils, my fascia reach out. They leave their old places and stretch into new ones, supporting parts that are tired and weak. Then suddenly, I'm done. I sit up. I'm physically woozy, but my work session is complete. I need water, and I have a stretch. Yeah, I guess what I'll say there is that was all part of a process of initially finding what I called my reset button. Like finding that thing that you could push, or the correct combination of movements to get me into some form of neutral, right? Some form of physical comfort. But I guess I'll read the second part now.
Okay. Now, was this on a different dose date?
So this was, let's see what this was. Sometimes I wrote the doses down and sometimes I didn't. So all of these were mini doses.
Okay.
And generally it was around 1.5.
Okay.
I spend all this time doing, making, working, when what I need is an undoing. Physically and mentally, letting all that effort slide away into nothing so I can reorganize, rest, and heal. I need to degunk from the inside out. I had been trying to find that place of neutral being from the outside in. I'm so intense and focused on getting things done, struggling, damaging myself in order to keep going. I needed something equally intense to focus on in order to let go. I am a ball of activated nerves and tension that needs to unwork, to undo in phases in order to achieve comfort and rest, to truly relax. I found my fire, but I need my heat. My flames are active, but they're cold. I'm coiled so tightly around myself, I'm strangling my oxygen. I need to stop swallowing springs. I need to allow that concentrated emotion, that heat, to expand inside me, to grow, to burn, to release. I've been treating that intensity of feeling like it was a poison to be avoided, filtered, neutralized, but it is my fuel. I am a ball of passion and fire. I tried to freeze myself in ice.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh, that's gorgeous. Thank you so much. Now, when you were moving through these grieving experiences, did you have, when you were feeling rage and sadness, did you have crying, or did you have a lot of tears? Did you have emotional release?
I did. Initially not. I really believe that. So as part of this process, again, I would have approached this saying, I did not have trauma. I just had physical pain. And through this process, I realized that I had so much trauma to unpack. I really had stuffed it all down, and I was so good. I was so good at denial. It was so effective, and it was such a good coping mechanism for me for such a long time. I put everything on my physical body. I was not ready or willing to acknowledge how much my mental inability to connect was holding me back. And so, yes, I did. It took me unraveling that physical component, which was, I want to just say, it was so top of mind. It was so ever present that I think I needed to work through that first to kind of get that out of the way in order to get at these subtle emotional bodies. And then, yes. And one of the things I also remember is, as I'm approaching these body scans and focusing so much on the physical, there was a being who approached me in an experience, a woman holding a basket. And she said, there's more for you outside of the body if you're ready to go deeper. And I said to her, no, thanks. No, thanks. I'm really I'm good here. I'm feeling good. I'm just starting to explore what it's like to have legs that function sort of normally. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good about this. And she said, okay, and just kind of disappeared into the distance. And it wasn't until many sessions later, many, that I finally accepted that invitation. And that's when I started to feel, to own my anger and my frustration and my pain, to really actually feel that. And that's when my writing really changed to, I wrote quite a piece that, I feel like sometimes I read it now and I go, if the wrong person, or like if somebody in the clinical medical profession would read this, I think they would think that I was having a psychotic break. Really, that it's because it is so real. And it is just an outpouring of this anger and this crying and this frustration. It really is. I think people don't necessarily understand the depth of the feeling that you can have when all of a sudden it comes over you in these experiences. It is a wailing, and it's not just you. It feels like it's a collective joining of voices, a howling, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't look normal, and it does look like a psychotic break. So you have to be in a safe environment, and it is different than just crying and processing something without the psilocybin. It is amplified like a light bulb compared to the sun.
Yes. And it's incredible catharsis, but you have to be willing to allow yourself to have that.
Courage, right? I mean, you have to be ready. And I love the story of your process, that it took all those doses and all those invitations before you were finally like, okay, let's go. And so I'm imagining, Irene, that you did say to yourself, okay, I'm ready, take me there. Did that happen first?
I did. So there were a couple of things that happened in my real life, right? It started to trickle in to my real life, where I was allowing myself to acknowledge the frustration and the anger that I was feeling about things that were happening in my work and in my life and around me. And I started to, instead of excusing those or saying, well, that's just something you need to work around or work through or get better at anticipating, I started to allow myself to say, no, this is wrong. These things are wrong. And they are bothering you, and they are burdensome. And that was a really important step, like taking that into, again, the real life and acknowledging what I was feeling when it was uncomfortable. I am angry, or I am anxious, or I am nervous, and really validating those feelings, because that was everything that I was repressing. I would have said in the past, yes, I feel those things, but I don't need to. I can control them. I can put them somewhere. I can shove them to the side. They are not helpful. And they all just really came flooding out when I started to feel, when I allowed myself to feel again. And so I actually came back to psilocybin and said, I am ready. I am ready for what's next, after feeling a period of profound discomfort and anger and frustration with other people. I work in an area where there are just a lot of challenges, and there is an unwillingness to really see the big picture in a lot of people, and that makes what I do very challenging. And so I work with systems that are failing all the time, and it is very difficult. It is very difficult to do that. And I think a lot of people in public service will be feeling the same thing. Our systems have failed us, and life is extremely uncomfortable for a lot of people. And acknowledging that, but also acknowledging that there's very little that you can do about that, right? The existential stuff, very little, is extremely challenging and uncomfortable, but necessary in order to move forward. So I had to kind of feel that in my real life and to acknowledge that level of discomfort, and then go back to the experience and say, okay, I'm feeling this, and it is such a challenge to me. The anger, the righteous anger that I'm not ready to let go of because I feel it's right, but it's eating me. It's eating me from the inside out. And that's when I opened the door, and all of this anger about my body and about society and about all of that came flooding out. And I felt that, and I wrote this extremely powerful piece that could probably be misinterpreted as a psychotic break, which was really just pleading with the universe to say, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do with this pain? Where do you want for me to put it? It's there. It's here all the time. I cannot make it go away. Where do you want it to go? And that's, I think that's initially what the woman in the darkness was trying to show me. What I'd like to actually, I think, read to you from the second part of that experience was, after that anger and that pleading with someone to help me figure out where to put this pain. So the first time that I really, really, truly allowed myself to embody this anger and feel this pain, I ended up writing this piece. And it really is, it's not intended to be a poem. It's not really intended to be anything except documentation of what I was experiencing in the moment. And I felt an urgency, again, to get it on the page in the same way that I felt the urgency for a physical release. This had to come out. And I was able to type it. So I was able to do this all very quickly as I was really just emerging from an experience. And I called it On the Agony of Being Aware in This Age, in This Body. I have run out of places to put the anger inside me. It's stuffed inside the couch cushions. I've cut apart the lovely fabric and hollowed it out just so there is some place to stuff my pain. I am tired of being expected to find the words to explain to other people my pain. I am tired of my burden being made more heavy by having to explain it. I am angry because nothing is working and I cannot make it work because the problem is not me. It is you and your lack of understanding, your inability to see through things, your insistence on the material. My existence makes you feel a certain way, and that makes me angry because I just want to be. I don't want to explain it to you. I feel I am. You don't get to ask for anything more. I want to find a way to be, but in the meantime, I have to find somewhere to put all this anger so that it doesn't poison me. Will you please help me find somewhere to put it? I've torn apart the couch cushions because nothing is working. I'm screaming and screaming, and it's not working to stem this flow of pain. Where would you like for me to put it? It's like this medicine wears me down until I cannot ignore anymore how I'm feeling. But then I'm screaming and I'm feeling. I'm screaming because it's stripped me of everything, and I can't ignore anymore that I'm still here in this vessel, seeing everything with such clarity. I've become a global filter expected to somehow suck up all the shit of reality and spit it back at you so that it's less of a poison to your existence, so that you're purified by my ability to see for you. I make you okay by the fact that I am here, making it seem like I am okay. And I'm expected to unpack this, to explain it so that you understand, because that's supposed to make me feel better. That just adds to the screaming. Please help me find somewhere to put this pain before it becomes anger and eats me alive, and I have to pull it out and find somewhere while running out of places to put it. I am not the problem. I am not the problem, but I feel like I am. That's why I'm always ready with a solution. Externally okay, inside screaming with nowhere left to put my pain. Do not make me explain it. It breaks the dam, the veneer of society, and I see that everything is terrible. Everything is terrible, and that's why I feel terrible. I am in this broken body. I have not asked for what I've needed, and I have not gotten it. I fight for others because there is no one there to fight for me. They want to look away and pretend that because I can still form elegant words to cover my misery, that is enough. By simply standing up, I put myself level with the firing squad. It is who I am. You make the act of rising more difficult by denying that truth. Just existing in this life asks me to do impossible things. Do not make me explain that while taking on your baggage just because I've proven I can carry it. Please see just how hard I'm working to hold everything together so that you don't have to think about it. Please. I'm screaming and I've run out of places to put my pain for your convenience. Please witness it. this screaming tower of power and anger. I have this inside me all the time. It does not go away. I just find places to put it temporarily. I've run out of places to put it. I cannot stop it. Just help me find somewhere else for it to go. Doing this for myself leaves me broken and exhausted. Can you please see that? Living without denial forces me into this place where there is nothing but anger and pain. There is no room for me to feel anything else because that's the room that has been built to hold me. I'm expected to look at this miserable little room with what? Gratitude? I want to blow it all apart because I know that I am so much more. I am in pain and I am pain, and that is power. I can see through reality and still name it. That alone would be a gift. But in this physical body, such consciousness becomes a superpower that can blow things apart. You should be terrified. I am terrified. Listen to me scream. A wise woman from the darkness offered me this basket early on. She said there was more for me if I went deeper. I told her no, not yet. I was just starting to feel what this could do for my body. It was turning on physical movements and connections that made me feel hopeful that I could have bodily comfort for the first time in such a long time. I wanted to use all my essence on that. I think this is what she was trying to show me. The power I had to scream.
That touches me so much because I resonate, and part of my incentive and drive and passion is to give people permission to go there because I trust the process. And so many people, we can't talk about going there. And so I'm so appreciative for you to have to put words to giving yourself permission to scream. My last experience, where I was in that wailing and in that screaming and in that crying, and I wrote about it as you did, and I shared it, and then I had so much shame about sharing it. And so I battle this doing my own work, being bold enough to give others permission. I get from that is that in community, as the mycelium connects us, we can give each other permission for that wailing, for that scream, which is unexplainable how sacred it can be. So that was so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh, I thank you. I'm realizing that I have the words for a lot of things that I did not expect to have the words for. There are certain aspects of these experiences that put me beyond language, but there are very few. And I'm also realizing that can be very helpful to others because it is difficult or impossible for many people to put these feelings into words. And I think it helps us all as a point of connection to make sense of that, and to validate them, right? To feel validated when we can effectively communicate that. And for me, it's been really powerful. And I have such gratitude, both for that ability, but also to share that with others.
I just love what you say about denial. And once you start to find peace, comfort, joy, once you start to live without the denial, then it becomes more intolerable to accept denial again or chaos. Do you feel like the work is just always going to be ongoing? Or do you feel like you're at a grounded, clean slate?
It's so interesting you asked that because after that last experience of catharsis, it has been about a month since I've had a session, and that is longer than I have gone in quite some time. And, I do think that this work is ongoing, but I think that for me, at least, what I really was struggling with also as part of this anger that has helped me was a level of frustration with my inner capacity to heal and accept myself, and the pressure that we get from society that is unwilling to really allow us to embody that fully. And I was experiencing an incredible amount of pressure between that dichotomy of being like, why can't you just allow me to have this? Why do I have to be so bent on fulfilling the demands of a material world? And the work has definitely shifted, but for me, it's actually come out into the real world more than it's been with the psilocybin sessions. I am really, through this, I have done a Zen training weekend, learning about aspects of Zen, which in Buddhist theory, sunyata, or the void, right? That would be my void, the place of infinite power, but also nothingness. That exists, and that is a good thing. It's actually a source of power. Tapping into this internal resource has opened up so much potential for me and other aspects of my life as well. But it has also revealed this increasing transparency of things. And I've always struggled with that. Like I've always, have to a certain extent an ability to see through things, right? To see to the core truth of of something. And that's very frustrating when you live in a world that does not value that, but also when objectively things are really profoundly terrible when you really have the courage to look deeply. And so that is my journey now, is transmuting that, accepting that, right? Accepting that ability and that power to see through things and to make something of it in this world, and finding a community of people with whom I can both help through that journey, but also who are just open to being, open to being present and open to acknowledging that. But yes, losing the denial is so powerful. There's a reason, there's a reason that society tells us to cover up our feelings with alcohol and sugar and caffeine and to alter our states, because fundamentally, when we really look closely at the way society is structured, it's often not to our benefit as human beings. And, these distractions, I think, become really damaging to who we are as individuals, that it really prevents us from seeing our true selves. Also, as part of this too, I really have embraced yoga, because the core philosophy of yoga at its root is to still the turnings of the mind so that the soul can see itself. And that, wow, I did not know that about yoga. I did not know that about anything. But all these philosophies, have this inner stillness at the root, but this inner reflection, this inner acknowledgement. And also, a lot of them are rejecting the idea of the Westernite duality, right? That there is mind and there is body and they are separate. No, we are mind and body and spirit, and they are all one. And so I'm really trying to take that practice and what I've learned from, yes, I can free my body to live without pain. It takes work, but I can do it. Movement helps, right? How do I find practices that embody that and embrace that and incorporate them into my life? And also, how do I acknowledge and where do I seek now, to find and maintain that inner stillness and clarity? And then what do I do with this power? Because it really, for me, it really does feel like I've uncorked. There's a well inside of me, and it is ready to come streaming out. But it's also a well of energy I have to protect, because a lot of people want it. And that's also something that I realized, is when you start to realize the people that surround you and what they're looking for from you, my instinct is always to step in and help. But I'm also realizing that that was a cover for my own discomfort. I was attempting to validate other people and their needs and their feelings because I was not validated in that way. And so that is all to say, we're getting into sort of psychology and a little bit of Jungian archetype here even, but talking about giving yourself permission to be there in your body for yourself. You once shared something with me that it resonated with me, but also I was I think I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. This story of, standing there wearing a tattered dress, right? And for me, that's a very powerful metaphor, because I can stand here in rags and be the most powerful and feel the best and most beautiful and in control. You know, the true essence of myself. It doesn't matter what I'm wearing, right? It can be nothing.
Well, this is amazing work. And I love how you're finding practices to contain, your well-being in your physical form and in your spiritual form with the Zen. It's so important. That definitely needs to be said. And people change when they do this work because they have to, or they're so blown open and it's a disaster. So, like, in the end, integration means protecting your well and protecting yourself and redirecting your life to the people, places, things, and work that is going to help sustain you, to be in a place to where at times your soul can see itself in full. So I love her story because it's hard for me to hear people's stories out there where they start this work and then they can't protect themselves enough to see it through. I'm just so proud of you, Irene. Thank you so much for sharing today everything that you did.
Thank you. This is, I guess, the sentence that most encapsulates where I am now is, I will not allow the failures of others to prevent me from embodying my own beautiful existence.
Well, thank you so much, Irene. And I can't think of anything better to end with than that.
Thank you all so much for listening. You can find all the information that you need to learn everything about this retreat on EleusiniaRetreat.com. We are a retreat that offers ongoing integration support, breathwork classes, and cultivation support after you have attended this retreat. It's an amazing experience that's one of its kind. If you're looking for a science-based retreat, something out of the box, something to change your life, something to add to your practice, this is where you really need to start. EleusiniaRetreat.com.